Good morning and welcome to our fifth annual Women in Digital Breakfast. We're very excited to bring this event to you virtually today. I'm Lynn Brading. I'm our National Alliance Director at Perficient, and I am a National Board Member for Pink Ribbon Girls. We are going to hear a message from Morgan Pressel, who's one of our brand ambassadors on Team Perficient.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Morgan Pressel, a professional golfer, TV broadcaster, dog mom, and proud member of Team Perficient. It's so great that you're all coming together today for Perficient and Adobe's annual Women in Digital Breakfast. We would have loved to join you personally today, but I'm getting ready to tee off in the LA Open soon. But it sounds like you're in for a great discussion centered around diversity and finding ways we can empower ourselves as women in our careers. One quick recommendation that I have is to actively seek growth opportunities in your career. Sometimes the opportunities might present themselves and seem very natural and obvious, and other times you might need to step outside your comfort zone and to find the opportunities yourself. I recently made the decision to step outside of my own comfort zone and join Golf Channel and NBC Sports as an on-course reporter and an analyst. And I knew that taking on this new role while also continuing to compete on the LPGA Tour would be challenging, but it is an opportunity for me to push myself and to learn a new skill. I've gotten a lot of great advice from many veterans in the TV industry, and a common theme emerged around authenticity. Everyone just told me to be myself. And there's a great reminder that even though I'm still new to this and have so much to learn, I'm fully capable and can in fact just be myself. So perhaps that's a great reminder for all of you as well. I know you have a great lineup of speakers today ready to share their experiences, tips, and lessons learned during their respective careers. Please enjoy the discussion.
Thank you, Morgan, and love the importance of being authentically yourself. What a great message. We have an amazing lineup of women today that are leaders in technology, and hopefully will bring some inspiration to you. First, we have Victoria Wallace, a Senior Director of Digital Strategy at Quest Diagnostics. We also have Lisa Spencer, an Enterprise Digital Leader at Ford Motor Company. We're also joined today by Suma Nalapati, the Chief Digital Officer at Dish Networks. And finally, our returning guest, Lonnie Stark. She's the Vice President of Strategy and Product at Adobe. We've prepared some great questions, and let's get started with our panel.
So I have a great question here that came in from one of our viewers here. So earlier in your career, how did you navigate being a woman in a traditionally male-dominated field? So we're going to start with you, Victoria.
So interesting question. I think experiences will definitely vary across industries and even within companies. Looking back at my career, I don't really ever feel like I viewed, gender as a specific challenge or issue. And there's probably a couple of reasons for it. So I think one thing is, thinking back on my life, as a child growing up in the 80s, I was one of the few kids that had a full-time working mother. So, came home after school, key in the door, but so I had that role model, and I really never questioned, that I had a seat at the table. I knew I belonged there. I always knew I would go to college. I always knew I would have a career. So that's probably part of the reason. And I think I just found myself also in, companies with a good culture. So not really an issue, but I do think, the underlying challenge of starting in a new career, right? How do you get that traction regardless of whatever the challenge is that you're, facing in terms of making a name for yourself and getting some traction? I think that's, obviously a shared experience. And I think there's a few things that I've learned along the way that are really instrumental. And some of these are, in hindsight versus having known them at the time. But I think there's really a couple key things when you're starting off in your career. The first thing is to realize, everything is about relationships. So you've really got to build up, your networking and your relationships with people. Even look to build your skill set through relationships with people. So just start with the close network of people that you work with and set up meetings and talk with them to understand what they do in their job, what their challenges are, share with them your challenges, share with them the soft skills that you're learning, trying to develop, and ask for advice from people. I think Benjamin Franklin, I know, was really famous for doing this. He would ask other people to help him, to bring them onto to his side. So once people have helped you they're invested in you and they want to continue helping you. So just, keep networking with people, find out how you can help them, ask them for their opinion, their feedback, etc. It goes a long way. I think another key learning is that it's really key that you demonstrate to your company the value that you're bringing. So everybody's working hard. So it's not enough to, state how hard you're working. You really need to show and quantify the value that you're bringing to your organization, which is hard to do. But that effort and that focus on documenting the value you're bringing, quantifying it, really goes a long way. And then I think, lastly, I would just say, make sure you're really in the right environment. I mean, we have choices in terms of, what company we work for. So make sure you're working for a company where the culture is a fit. Make sure you're working for a manager who has your back, who is advocating for you, helping you look for opportunities. Just really make sure that you're in the right place.
Those
are my experiences.
No, great answers. Thank you so much. Suma, what about you? Early in your career, how did you navigate being a woman in a traditionally male-dominated field?
Yep, I've been in IT for 25 years, and being a woman and a woman of color, it's double whammy sometimes, and it comes with for the women that are listening on the call that are, women of color. I think you guys can resonate it. It comes with a lot of cultural repercussions as well, right? Growing up, we were women in India. They're asked to be like submissive. They're asked to be quiet. That's the way we grew up. And when you speak up, it's not appreciated. So for me, I had to overcome and surmount that challenge, as well as being in a new country. I migrated here with zero friends and zero network, and I had to start from the very ground up. So there is no substitute for hard work. You have to be working harder than the smartest person in that room. And I think Victoria mentioned, right, quantify all your successes and all the value that you're providing to the company in a very meaningful, statistically solid way. Don't make it emotional, right? I need that promotion because no, it needs to be backed up with facts. And I've always taken risk. I think the one piece of advice that I would give to women who want to go to that next level, be fearless. There is no fear in trying something new. I was only one of 3 women students in nuclear physics, which is my degree, and just one more kid at that time in my specialization, which is radiation physics and isotope technology. And I did not have mentors. I did not have role models. I did not have other women to go ask them questions, whether it was in my physics field or in my computer science field. So I had to seek those people actively, build that network for asking like basic questions. But I am a curious person, and I let my curiosity drive a lot of my career progression. And the same thing held in IT. And being fearless, I had a lot of private sector experience, but when I worked for the governor, I had zero public sector experience. And I took a risk. I was fearless. I was like, let me go. All I have is my core of technology, and I can learn the public sector aspect of it. And I was blessed to have great mentors that advised me on how to approach a joint budget committee hearing, a joint technology committee hearing. And I sought those people out to help me with the gaps that I had in my knowledge of running a billion-dollar organization in the state of Colorado. So I think surrounding yourself with the people that will be your advocates, that will be your mentors, and then you can learn a lot about the things that are gaps in your career, and then you can surmount them. So just be fearless.
I love that. Be fearless. I'm gonna get a T-shirt with that on it. Okay, what about you, Lisa? Or sorry, it's Lonnie. Lonnie, what about you?
Yeah, no worries. I think, you asked about early in my career, and I'd say that when I first, looking back on it, everything seems 2020. But when I was in the throes, trying to put myself back when I started, I didn't necessarily go, okay, Lonnie, you're going to navigate this male-dominated career. But what I did notice, right, a few things I noticed were, one, that it was harder for me to build relationships with the other guys because they had commonalities and they felt more comfortable hanging together than I did as a woman. And it was not any fault on theirs, but just, people hang out and form groups based on commonalities. And so I realized that I needed to offer something different. I needed to be smarter. I needed to know my area better. And so looking back on that, I think it's about making sure you have the skills to be the protagonist, right? If you watch a movie, you see that there is a hero, there is a heroine that is the main character. And so it's about making sure you have, the skills. And so I would learn, I would read, I would even, I know I'm not suggesting you do this, right? But I'm telling you what I did. Time when there was on vacations, my vacations, I would actually go take a course. I would learn things at night, right? And I would do that. The other thing that I think was important back then was I saw all the stats, right? You see this like the pay gap and all of those things. And what I said to myself back then was, Lonnie, what do you want? Okay. And I said, I wanted to be paid the same amount as a guy. I want the same opportunities. And then I said to myself, the world is not as fair as you would want it to be. So what do you have to do to get the same thing as a guy? And I said, well, the pay gap is 30%. I'm going to have to work 130% of more than, a counterpart. I said, is this something you really want? I said, yes. I want a reality where I get paid the most as a guy, ideally for the same amount, but you can't have it all in the world, right? And I wasn't going to wait for the whole equalization to happen, which is taking far longer than we expected to. So I think that's what I committed to myself from the very beginning. And I said, look, if the world became all equal, I'm going to get paid 130% more. And if it isn't, I'll have achieved what I wanted, was to get to 100%. And that's something I really focused on. Every point in when I was growing up, everything I, said I wanted, I really asked myself if I really wanted it. And if I really wanted it, what did I need to get it? And that's what I, sort of went for.
I love that. So going the extra mile where it means the most to you and seeing
exactly.
the outcome because of that.
And I want to tell people, I'm not justifying how it is right now. I'm just saying, at least for myself, and this is all personal sharing, I'm not waiting for that knight in shining armor to save me, in this whole thing. I read all the stats and I'm like, this is a multi-generational problem. Hell, I'm not waiting until, that happens. I'm going to, pull up my dress and start, walking in the direction I want to and figure it out my damn well self.
Good for you. Carve your own path. Mm-hmm. Love that. Thank you, Lonnie. Lisa, what about you? Navigating the other world, traditionally male, and how have you done that?
So I would have to agree a bit with what Victoria was saying up front. My experience is a little bit different, obviously than others on the call, but even some of the speakers we've had here. So I also grew up in a household with a working mother. A lot of my friends, their moms did not work. Not only was my mom a working mother, she was also the primary breadwinner. So we had a very different dynamic growing up. I have two sisters. So my poor dad was overwhelmed by women in his household. But we were always taught that it's not about gender. It's about who you are, how you approach things, and you can be that lead you want to be. There's certain things you have to work hard at, like Lonnie was talking about. There's challenges we have to overcome, whether it's gender-based, whether it's racially based, whether it's just certain personality traits. Even the sound of your voice can impact someone's perception of you, and all of those things are factors that we always have to address. But I was lucky enough to grow up never having some of those doubts in my mind that's not how it's supposed to be. I would also say, coming into the ad business, there's probably a little bit of a better mix between men and women. But when I transitioned over into auto, there is no doubt it is a very heavily male-dominated industry. And even there are things that I'm very lucky with. There are people I work with today who have been with the company much longer, and they blazed a lot of those trails on behalf of the women who are successful today and who are continuing to grow in their careers, and incredibly grateful for them. I'm not sure if one of them's on the call here, but there's definitely so much that's already been done on behalf of us who are working through our careers and working to grow our leadership capabilities. But it doesn't mean it's all equal. It doesn't mean there aren't still challenges. For those who are earlier in their career and are looking for opportunities, I'd say the biggest areas that were opportunities for me was, first, always have this mindset of learning. So I came from a marketing background, and I focused in on a tech-heavy space. So obviously there was a little bit of a tech gap. So I had the psychology, I had the marketing influence behind it. I wanted to marry it up with the technology to understand how it enabled the things I wanted to create for the company and for the customer. And what that meant was finding those right subject matter experts, building my network, and frankly, just sitting with them, constantly learning. I didn't want to know just what we did, but why we did it, how we did it, because that really influenced not only how I thought through what we were going to create next, but why we created it and what the different solutions could be. And frankly, even though I'm a bit more homegrown in my technical knowledge at this point, but the area that our group in digital enterprise focuses on, we are a very dynamic and I would say fierce team, a mix of men and women who come with a solid understanding of the consumer, and we work hard to create those great experiences by enabling it through technology. And most of us don't come with that tech background. So learn. You never know where it's going to take you in your career. Did I think that I would ever be in a room sitting with solution architects and raising my voice onto what the right experience would be? No way I ever thought that. But it's what I do on almost a daily basis. I think the other really important thing is find a mentor. So someone who inspires you. It doesn't have to be someone who's directly in the area that you're focusing in on, but it's someone who can guide you in the areas where you have gaps. You don't know what you don't know yet. And, every day you're going to learn something new. Find that mentor. Find someone who will champion you as an individual and in your career and coach you along the way. And then finally, speak up. Be confident in who you are and what you know. So none of us are in the positions we're in because we happen to fall into them, or I'd say most of us aren't, maybe a lucky few, but we're there for a reason. We worked hard to get there. The company sees the value that we all bring to the table. So don't stay quiet, be loud, speak up. Suma mentioned don't be emotional, and I 1000% agree. As a woman, it is hard to not have passion misconstrued as emotion. So back it up with data. You can be an incredibly passionate individual for what you do, but back it up with the facts and it'll go a long way.
Wow, those are some amazing answers, ladies. And I think we see a couple of themes here. Educate yourself, go above and beyond with your education, learn, be bold, find a mentor, be fearless, carve your own path, pick up your dress and get ahead, right? Awesome. Thank you for those. So next question, looking back on this past year, the year that was 2020, what was the top lesson that this year taught you? We're going to start with Suma this time.
I think the biggest lesson for 2020 for me is resilience. I think we as a humanity overcame or overcoming. I know there are certain parts of the world still struggling a lot with the pandemic, but we did not miss a beat. We hopped onto Google Meets, we hopped onto all kinds of virtual connections, and we let the world continue on. And I'm also deeply grateful for all the healthcare workers, all the people that worked so hard to bring the innovation and get vaccines sped up so much. That shows that we as a humanity are extremely innovative and resilient. We can get through huge challenges. The way we looked at education last year, the way we looked at connecting with our teams within hybrid solutions, the way technology helped accelerate not missing a beat. all those are like extremely grateful things for me in 2020. And the one profound thing for me is, there are strife in several parts of the world, right? Usually there's like a war in Europe, or there's like a pandemic in India, or like floods and fires in some parts of another country. But with this pandemic, we as a humanity experience something globally together. The same conversations at our dinner table about, when am I getting my vaccine is happening in another part of the world. And that to me is very unique with this situation. There is a saying in Sanskrit that says, Vasudaika Kutumbam, which is, Sanskrit is a very ancient language. It means the whole world is my family, Vasudaika Kutumbam. And I think with this pandemic, with all of us experiencing, every single country going through the same thing, in spite of all the challenges, there was so much strife, but we connected as a humanity going through a big, huge pandemic together. So that to me is very unique this time. So.
Thank you, Suma. Those words are beautiful, and I think you're right. We globally experienced it together, and we're grateful that we were able to be together and starting to come out the other end. Lonnie, how about you? What did this past year teach you?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments Suma mentioned about resilience and gratitude. It's funny, on a personal level, 2020 probably for many of you like us, I had all these plans and they didn't pan out because a lot of it involved travel and everything else. And I had a moment where I was like, this is going to be crappy. And then I started to go think about all the things I was grateful for, and even got, my husband and I together, and we had like gratitude dinners throughout 2020 where we talked about the things we were grateful for. And it was such a really fulfilling exercise. I know it sounds cheesy, and he thought so too until he did it, and he was like, that was a good experience. I did tease him with meat and beer. That usually gets my husband to do what you need him to do. But the other thing I think is the saying, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. And it taught me that it's important to understand what you can control and what you can't, and then be able to make the best out of the situation. So one of the things we didn't have was didn't have to commute. So I didn't have to commute to work. My art studio and my home and my office all converged in the middle of my home. So you're looking literally at the middle of my home. The dining room turned into my art studio and home office. And that meant that all of that commute time, that time between, the half hour on the road, can converge to either I'm doing work, I'm doing art, and it's kind of, or I'm eating, right? Like it's all in this area. And so for a whole year, don't laugh, I imagined that I was my superhero, Batman. And Batman's my superhero that I like because he doesn't have any supernatural powers. He only has gadgets. And there's a story that Batman's like this ordinary person. I know he's not real, okay? And he goes off for a year to train to be Batman, right? And he's like in this place where he's training. And what I imagined is that this year of COVID, that I was coming back into my home and I was going to train. And then I imagined how I would emerge at the end of it, yes. And I saw that look of Victoria. So I'm going to stop at this moment before everybody else in the panel thinks I'm completely cutesy here, and just be like, this is something I really imagined. Okay.
I love that, but I think of you more of like as a butterfly than Batman, Lonnie. Emerging from your cocoon and growing your wings and flying. Thank you. That's I love your perspective there. Lisa, what about you? What did 2020 teach you?
So I guess the question is, what didn't 2020 teach all of us? I think it taught us that any preconceived notions we had on what's normal, what life should be, and what is important or what should be priority, a lot of those things changed, or the way we approach them changed. I'd say, and I'm going to take it to an example specifically with work. Before March, I honestly, I thought I knew what hard work looked like from a career perspective. I thought I knew what it looked like to work hard, to give it your all, to approach that point of burnout and find ways to reinvigorate yourself, reinvigorate your team, and get back and going. And I learned first and foremost that I was wrong. I had no idea what hard work looked like. I had no idea how challenging it could be. But really what that comes down to is 2020 taught me you have to be flexible. So you have, and it was mentioned before, you have these preconceived notions on what things are supposed to look like, what the work week's supposed to look like, what personal time's supposed to look like. And you have to be willing to change and adjust, because nothing looked like what I think any of us ever expected it should be. None of us have ever lived through a global pandemic, so we can now add that to our resume or PRs for the year for 2020. But being able to just realize, like Lonnie said, you can control only how you react to a situation. You can control only how you respond to your kid who doesn't seem to understand that you have a camera rolling and you're presenting to executive leadership, but they really, really want to show you that thing that they just did, or, oh my gosh, the computer won't log into their Zoom, and that's the worst thing on their plate. And, the amount of forgiveness I think that people had towards each other was just amazing, because we all take ourselves so seriously. At the end of the day, it's not that our work isn't important, but most of us aren't saving lives. I know I'm not. Good news, babies lost that day, 0 babies saved, 0. But it's amazing how much we can be forgiving to each other, and learn that you can't always take yourself so seriously, and we just have to be flexible. I think our customers took something that was already accelerating, at least in the automotive space. So the role that digital plays in a shopper's journey, that massively accelerated in 2020. And being able to adjust to that was very difficult. We all had plans, we all had cycle plans we were moving towards, and we had to change quickly. From a personal perspective, I think the other big one, and it still applies to work, is our ability to say no, our willingness to say no. And frankly, it became a bit of a struggle to be willing to say no. It seems that the expectation was everyone's going to give 1,000%. Good news, you don't have a commute anymore, which means I just got 2 more working hours out of you, so keep going. And that was challenging when you have, for those kids who were in school, drop-offs, pickups, and, support for virtual days and helping kids along the way. And, it's again, a struggle, something I continue to learn on, which is to say no, to realize that we're not living at work, we're working from home. And I stole that from somebody, I don't know who it was, but whoever it is, you get credit for that. And that working from home means that home is still the priority. The family is still the priority. And we have to be very conscious of balancing it, because everything's a fire, everything needs to move fast, but we need to make sure that we're keeping the first thing first.
I love that. And I think we talk about that internally. My kids are raised, but we have plenty of people here who have children at home and who have had to work through this pandemic with their children. And I think for me, that my favorite things this year have been the kids that pop on the screen from behind and, want to wave and say hi. And it's like, everyone's going through it, and it just made it all so real. And so we saw the humanity in people through that. So thank you for that, Lisa. Victoria, what about you?
Sure. So I think I'm going to echo some of what we've heard earlier, that really it was just a reminder that our mindset really is the fundamental tool that we have at our disposal, right? So it was a very challenging year, an overwhelming year, and it's still overwhelming. We're into April of 2021, and it's still challenging. But what we can control is our perspective, right? And the mind right to it. So in my company, I work for a healthcare company. It was an overwhelming year. We had to respond, instantly and try and bring to market COVID lab testing that was, urgently needed by the world, brought that to market in record time, and then had to service an unprecedented volume of that testing. So it was, all hands on deck across the whole company. So, I did my part. All of my colleagues were working, night and day and weekends. Overwhelming situation. At the same time, I'm leading the largest project of my career. We're moving our corporate site onto the Adobe platform. So I've got that project going. and had to shift to doing that, virtually, remotely, overnight. And then, like we mentioned here, lots of people have kids at home. So my kids are teenagers, but still require driving around and support. And now they're doing school from home. So we had, the childcare support we had before was now a void as well. So an incredibly overwhelming situation that I'm sure, everybody felt as well. What I did is I leaned on tools that I had used in the past earlier in my life when I found myself also in overwhelming situations. So probably the most overwhelming time in my life prior to this was when my children were really young. So, anybody out there that's, got young children and working full time, it is incredibly challenging. You literally will have days where you have not one single moment, to yourself, right? And you just get exhausted and burnt out. So when my children were young, I realized this. And what I did was I employed for myself a strategy where every day I would make sure that I did one thing that was just for myself, something that I wanted to do, and something that was good for me, right? Those are the three criteria. And it could be literally 3 minutes, right? Go outside, stretch a little bit, enjoy the sunshine. The key really is not the activity, it's the focus and mindset that you're bringing to it. So by realizing that you were having this one moment in your day where you were doing something that was enjoyable to you, you weren't taking care of other people, it is really just enough to pull you through the day, right? So it can really get you through those hard moments. And I leaned on that again. I started employing that again because I was finding the work hours, taking care of, everybody in the household with reduction in support that I had, previously to do that, it became overwhelming again. So that was really my go-to tool, a lifesaver.
Definitely. So I think all in all, I think the resounding word was resilience for 2020. I also love that this word grateful crept in here, because who would have thought that we would all be grateful for living through a pandemic? The days, the ins and outs of the day, but the grateful word really stands out to me. And then taking time for yourself, being flexible. I love all of your answers, and I've written so many notes down because I'm in my 50s and I learn from other ladies like you, as I'm sure there are many people on this call doing the same. So with that, we'll go to our next question. As a subject matter expert and leader in your organization, how do you make sure your voice is impactful? We're going to start with Lisa on that one.
Thanks, Lynn. So to be impactful, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, a lot of it comes down to the confidence and the passion that you express when you're sharing a point of view. So be passionate, be precise, be bold. And particularly right now, when companies are trying to approach how to be more nimble and how to go faster, the voice of the subject matter expert can easily get lost. And it's really critical that those of us who are in technology, that are starting to grow our capabilities and our understandings in this space, we bring that voice of reason and we support that reason with data, so that we can make a clear point of view, that we can express it, and again, be passionate about what we're doing and why we're doing it. This is about the customer, first and foremost. It's about doing right by the business, secondly, and right by our teams in the process. So make sure you're being bold, being passionate, champion your team members along the way. We're all in it together, but don't be afraid to speak up, and definitely don't be afraid to be a big voice in the room. So there's a lot. And I think as a woman, I personally struggle with this, and I think it's a little bit in our nature to overthink things. We are worriers by nature, and so don't let that get in the way of being loud and speaking up. Don't overthink what you're doing. Know that you know what you know because you've worked hard to get there, and be that loud voice in the room.
Love it. So boldly confident. That's great. So Victoria, what about you? How do you make sure your voice is impactful?
So I think one thing that I've really relied on over the years is learning from other people. So when you're in a meeting and you observe other people that are being listened to and that their advice is being followed, just take a moment and pause and reflect on, what is that person doing that is working well for them, right? And try and extract from that, try and turn that into tactics. Okay, they are speaking slowly and clearly. They are stating facts. Or to try and come out of that meeting with tactics that you can then employ yourself. I think it's also really helpful when you find those people that are doing it really well, reach out to them and have a conversation with them. People are generally really happy to have a conversation with you if you approach them by saying, you know, in that meeting, I noticed that you really do such a great job with X. I'm really impressed. And I'm trying to get better at that myself. You know, could you spend some time with me and help me understand how you do that? So a good example is actually one of my very first supervisors was a brilliant man, had a master's from Harvard, had some consulting experience, brilliant. And I found myself in meetings with him and noticing that during the meetings, he was taking notes on what was happening in the meeting and structuring his notes in a very specific way so that when the meeting was done, he not only absorbed the information in the meeting, but he had a very structured response prepared right away, instantly. So I did pull him aside. I said, how do you do that? You are such a fast thinker. You know, I can barely keep up with what's happening in the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, you've solved it all. You know exactly what we should do, the pros and cons, the risks, you know, and he sat down with me and explained to me how he structures it. I mean, he's literally got like a, you know, quadrant drawn on a piece of paper, and he would, you know, structure his thoughts that way. So really spending some time with him and understanding how he did that is something that I employed then, you know, going forward. And actually, I think, Lisa, you were talking about, you know, speaking up, and it was pretty interesting. That same supervisor also said to me, he pulled me aside once and said, I see you in meetings. We're in meetings and I see the wheels turning. I know you're thinking of stuff, but you don't mention it. You just sit there. And, you know, I was nervous. I always thought, what if I'm wrong, you know? But he said to me, and I'll never forget these words. He said, we are paying you for your opinion. So start doing your job. And that was really a very pivotal moment for me. I realized, okay, he's asking me, you know, to step up and share my thoughts. And that was something that I really took to heart and started doing going forward.
That is a great story, and I love that. I'm going to take that action item for myself. Thank you for sharing that. Suma, what about you? How do you make your voice impactful?
I focus a lot on keeping myself relevant and not information that's stale, right? Like you have different forms of getting updated with the knowledge, but you know, I learn a lot from young people. I pay a lot of attention to how they are seeking things. I don't know if any of you have like teenagers that look at things very differently. The way they learn is through TikTok and Snapchat and this and that, but it's the same content, but the way they take it in and process is like very interesting to me. You're not selling to just one demographic in any company. You're not selling it to professional women. You're selling to teenagers, right? Hopefully your market is all kinds of demographics. So keeping myself relevant to all categories of people from all areas. I learn a lot from walking the floors with my developers because they're learning things differently. When I was a programmer back in the 94, 95 timeframe, things have changed so much. It went from heavy coding to all configuration-based products. So keeping yourself always relevant to all demographics, all sorts of knowledge is the way that your voice is heard, and it's a diverse perspective rather than the things that you learn from a cookie cutter approach. So I would say just be very open, very curious, keep an open mind about every different perspective because it's going to enrich your knowledge. It's going to bring a very uplifting experience when you speak up in a meeting because it's not just one perspective that's yours. So
I love that, and I do know a personal story, Suma, that you do you do engage very much with everyone at your organization. I have one of my son's best friends right out of college came to work for Dish, and he said that you were right there presenting on the very first day. So I love that you have that outreach to everyone in your organization, especially someone brand new. So I wanted to share that story.
Thank you.
Lonnie, what about you? How do you make sure your voice is impactful?
I would say a couple of things. One is making sure you have the data. I think a lot of folks on the call mentioned that, right? Knowing all the things before you go into that meeting. And I think the second is sometimes it's about also, I call it calling your own party, meaning that sometimes you're in other people's meetings. Sometimes if you think there's an important topic that you want to really make sure gets in front of people, call a meeting, drive the initiative. So that's the other thing I sometimes do. Earlier in my career, I would hear about certain meetings that would happen. I would be like, I wasn't invited to that meeting. How come? I know about this topic and things like that. And then I said to myself, well, why does it have to always be someone else's meeting? Why can't it be the initiative that I'm driving? And so if there's an initiative that you think is important to the company, then I will also think about things that I want to champion. And that's another way I've found that my voice can be heard is if I'm championing these and inviting others to the table to have a conversation. I would say the final thing, because I get approached by women asking me for career advice is I think there's trepidation to sometimes speak out because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing or saying something that will make them appear, there's always this idea that because of, you got to appear perfect all the time. Clearly, you notice I've shed that from my repertoire. But I think that trying, right, the at-bats, like how many times are you in meetings? And I know this sounds trite, but you don't get good at something you're not practicing. And so a rule or something to think about that I've challenged other women to do is when you're in a meeting and it's a meeting that you have something to contribute, which is oftentimes why you're invited to these meetings, make it a goal to at least say something in the meeting, even once, right? And it just starts getting you comfortable with that so you can start to go through it. And then the other part of it is don't overthink it. Earlier in my career, I would say something and then be like, oh my God, like afterwards I would analyze it 10 times. Like, did I say the right thing? Did it come out the right way? What did other people think? And I would see some of my other colleagues and they will have already forgotten what the entire meeting was about. They've moved on. They've gone into, I'm being a little exaggerated here, Victoria, just for, dramatics here. But I mean, like they would have said the thing and moved on. They didn't analyze 20 times. And I find that that's more common in women. From the male and female folks that come and ask me for career advice, I see that more with females, that they tend to question themselves more. So those are one, hold your own party. If you think your voice isn't heard in certain other ones, invite other people to your table. And then two, if you're getting started, just start to say stuff in meetings. No one, as someone, I think Lisa said, unless you're in certain fields, no one dies, right? If you say something and you learn from it and you move on.
That's all great advice. So to summarize here, I think we said we're paid for our opinions. Be confident, have passion, make sure that your passion is backed up with data. Seek the advice of the young. I love that one, Suma. And get your at-bats. And if you've not been invited to the party, create your own party. I love that. All right, ladies, we are actually coming up on time, so we're going to quickly do our final question and then say our goodbyes. So, what would you like your legacy to be? I know this is a tough question, and we'll try to get it maybe 30 seconds each. So, Lonnie, what would you like your legacy to be? Batman?
No, I thought about it. I've been at Adobe for 20 plus years. I've gone through good quarters, bad quarters, everything. So I said to myself, what am I in this for? And one of the things I want to leave is I want to develop the next generation of leaders. I want to create a team that will propagate a culture, which is one that really values people's opinions equally and where people can feel like they can be the best leaders. And so that's what I want to do, is develop the next bench of strong, including lots of women, leaders.
I have no doubt that you're already doing that. Lisa, what about you? What do you want your legacy to be?
When I step away from this all someday, I want people to say that I cared, that it mattered to me, whether it's my family, whether it's my teammates, the work, the customer. I want people to say that as someone who truly cared. You're not always going to do, you'll come up with ideas, you'll put your best foot forward. It's not always going to be right. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. Sometimes it's going to be embarrassing, but do it with that passion, that commitment, and because you care, and you'll always be moving one step closer to where you want to get to.
I love that. That's beautiful. Victoria, how about you?
Interesting. I mean, honestly, my legacy will be my children. I mean, my priority really is my family. And so, working hard to, raise good people. And that's really what I'm focused on. But if you're, asking about work, I think really what I'm focused on accomplishing at Quest is breaking down the silos that we currently have. So a big cultural shift in terms of getting everybody to work together on the digital experience for our customers. We have a very siloed, fragmented approach, and it's just not, it doesn't work. You can't achieve the type of customer service that you need to have. And we're making progress with that, getting the company to invest in those large platforms that everyone can use. So that's what I'm focused on now.
I have no doubt that will be an amazing legacy for you. And what about you, Suma? What do you hope your legacy will be?
My legacy is I want to be remembered as an authentic person who lived to the fullest and lived unapologetically and made an impact.
I love that. And that comes back full circle to Morgan kicking us off today and saying that her advice was to be authentic. I think we've shared a beautiful hour with some great perspectives from some professional things, some personal things, and we appreciate you opening up your lives to us. This was amazing. I do want to say thank you to Ford for donating the Warriors in Pink scarves. They will be sent out to our attendees after the fact. So thank you, Ford. I'm a breast cancer survivor, so very passionate about anything that has to do with breast cancer awareness. So thank you, Ford and Lisa, for getting those for us. Thank you, ladies. I think, Monique, you have a couple closing statements, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, ladies. And thank you all for joining today. This concludes our session, and you may now disconnect. Have a wonderful day. And don't forget, before you connect, we have a survey for you. If you could take a chance, it's at the top of your screen, and give us your feedback for future events. Thank you again, and thank you all to our presenters and our panelists. You have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.